Thousands of kids in Denver are heading back to class for a new school year, and the district is laying out their plan to help students succeed.
If we do have to pivot, we will pivot, but we won't lose sight of our goals. So that's exciting.
And a teenager shot and killed on the basketball court. His family and friends desperate to find out why this happened.
Our youth should be able to feel safe and be safe.
Plus, be prepared for more travel headaches this fall, as airlines plan to cancel thousands of flights. And the Broncos get blown out in Buffalo, with just one game left to regroup before the regular season.
Defense didn't play good enough, the offense didn't play good enough, especially in the beginning.
A traffic alert at 11. The westbound lanes of US 36 are now back open near Broomfield. Those lanes were closed for hours earlier on today because of a crash involving 4 cars. The State Patrol says one person was taken to the hospital, but troopers haven't said what caused that crash. It's the first day of school for students in Denver Public Schools, our state's largest school district with more than 90,000 kids now back in the classroom. The district hosted a 2022-2023 school year kickoff event out at Ellis Elementary School this morning. Superintendent Dr. Alex Marrero and Denver Mayor Michael Hancock were on hand to give high fives and welcome kids back to school. Parents we talked to said their kids were ready for the new school year and were excited to meet their teachers.
So excited to be back in the classroom. And my daughter's looking forward to it.
The teachers are all excited. I'm comfortable and I feel well informed, and I think she's getting set up for a great, wonderful year here at LA.
Now, this is the first year the district could welcome back students in person without mask requirements since the start of the pandemic. Now, students in Denver will notice some of their schools will look a bit different. The district implemented new safety upgrades over the summer. All schools will now have secure doors. The doors have alarms if they're forced open or when they're propped open for too long. Office staff will be immediately notified. They'll have immediate access then to cameras showing areas surrounding that door. Now, DPS also says they've replaced 900 cameras and added 1,200 more.
If you keep bad things out of your building, you're ahead of the game. And so we've really invested a lot of time in access control and monitoring our entrances to our buildings and single point of entry to emphasize a secure perimeter and funneling everybody in and having checkpoints throughout that process.
Now, DPS has a new strategic roadmap to help students succeed. It's called Every Learner Thrives and sets goals for students to achieve by 2026. Denver 7's Nicole Brady sat down with DPS Superintendent Dr. Alex Marrero to talk about that strategic plan. He says the plan addresses equity and closing the gaps for students of color.
It is the work of everyone, from our bus driver who picks up the student in the morning to the escort and the paraprofessional who supports them on their way to during the classroom, of course the classroom, the leader, all the way to everybody who's here in this incredible building as well. We're functioning in a mindset, thinking strategically, and a strategic roadmap. So if we do have to pivot, we will pivot, but we won't lose sight of our goals.
Now, Nicole also talked with Dr. Marrero about declining enrollment and closing schools. You can watch that full interview right now up on thedenverchannel.com. College students also going back to class today. Today is the first day of classes out at CSU. The school says this year's freshman class will likely be the largest in that school's history.
We're not the only institution that has that, and I don't know if it's because of after the pandemic, students took a gap year and now are excited to come back to college.
Today, also the first day of classes up at CU, the University of Northern Colorado, and the Colorado School of Mines. Millions of people could find out if or when they need to start repaying their student loans soon. The Biden administration says an announcement about loans could happen within the next week. Payments are scheduled to start up again at the end of the month. Student loan payments have been on pause since the start of the pandemic. Friends and family are remembering a 13-year-old boy. Zay Rosales was shot and killed while playing basketball with his cousin over the weekend in Longmont. As Denver 7's Veronica Acosta reports, his family trying to make sense of what happened.
All morning long, we have seen loved ones stop by this memorial here at Kensington Park for 13-year-old Zay Rosales. This is right next to the court where he and his cousin would come and play basketball. It's now a memorial for him. It is filled with Flowers and candles, balloons and notes. Those teens should have spent last night, Sunday evening, at home watching TV, maybe getting ready for school for Monday morning. Instead, one of those teens was here mourning his younger cousin. Now the boys' families, they are left trying to figure out why this all happened.
We're heartbroken, just crushed, and I just heard so much from my daughter to see her hurting like this so much.
That's the best feeling in the world. I mean, to see your kids grow up, and unfortunately, with all this happening, they're taking children's lives away, and it's unnecessary.
Both Valerie and Steve de Herrera say they're left asking themselves how this could have happened to their families, to their boys. They say now they're tasked with trying to do what feels impossible right now, which is move on. They're also left trying to help their 15-year-old grandson, Elias de Herrera, who was shot in the leg, really make sense of everything that happened, and more importantly, make sense of life without his younger cousin, who his grandparents say was more like a brother. The family now also left with having to plan and pay for a funeral, which is exactly why the GoFundMe to 13-year-old Zay's funeral expenses is on our website, thedenverchannel.com. In Longmont, I'm Veronica Acosta, Denver 7.
The owner of Winchells Donut House in Lakewood is trying to figure out how to move forward 1 week after an RV crashed into his shop. The driver and a customer inside have serious injuries, and that building is also badly damaged. The owner tells us the place is going to have to be demolished because it's just unsafe. He was inside when the crash happened. He says the injured customer was a regular, a 70-year-old man who was thrown across the room.
He got hurt a little bit in his back, and he got a little cut, here and there. So we sent him to the hospital, make sure he's okay. I can't even salvage most of my equipment's not gonna be salvaged. I'm just throwing away everything.
Police say the RV driver lost control, making a turn. So far, he hasn't been charged. Aurora will introduce a resolution today to discourage people from giving money to panhandlers. The resolution includes a public education campaign to encourage people to donate to local charities instead. The city council says charities can use that money to support people in need. Aurora already has laws that ban, quote, aggressive begging and people from approaching drivers in traffic. Congressman Jason Crow is visiting the Metro this week. He wants to hear from the public about his work in Congress and on the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act. Today's town hall is at 4:30 at the Colbell Library in Centennial. Tomorrow's is at 5 in Aurora at the City Council chambers. People can RSVP online, and that's also where you can submit any questions you might have. Dr. Anthony Fauci is leaving the Biden administration at the end of the year. Fauci is the government's top infectious disease expert and became a household name during the coronavirus pandemic. He's also President Joe Biden's chief medical officer. Fauci says he will continue to work in public health. We could get more information this week on why the Department of Justice searched former President Donald Trump's property at Mar-a-Lago 2 weeks ago. A federal judge ordered that a redacted version of the affidavit be submitted to him by Thursday for possible public release. Denver 7's Joe St. George looks at the series of legal investigations that are currently surrounding the former president.
Let's start with some facts, shall we? For one, Donald Trump is the former president of the United States, and whether you voted for him or not, he's not your average Joe. Two, he's facing multiple investigations, and whether you believe it's a witch hunt, like Mr. Trump has repeatedly said, or justified, the reality is these investigations are happening. They're not going away anytime soon, which is why it's important to understand exactly what's going on. After all, it's all a bit confusing. Let's start with investigation number one, the classified documents inquiry. This is the most high-profile investigation at the moment. 2 weeks ago, the FBI raided the former president's home at Mar-a-Lago. Recently unsealed court documents indicate officials are looking into whether the president broke federal laws with the, quote, willful retention of national defense information. Mr. Trump has said all the documents in his home were ones he had declassified.
We've never had anything like this before.
Richard Serafini is a criminal defense attorney in South Florida who previously worked in the criminal division at the Department of Justice for 11 years. He says the fact a raid happened shows the attorney general seriously believed it's possible the former president broke the law. In cases like this, search warrants tend to happen toward the beginning of an investigation.
We're not near the end of this investigation.
Investigation number 2, the Georgia election interference case. The local district attorney in the Atlanta area is looking into whether the former president and his allies broke laws by denying the 2020 election results. One of the biggest pieces of evidence against the president, a recorded phone call between Trump and the Georgia Secretary of State in which Mr. Trump allegedly asked the official to, quote, find 11,000 plus votes. Investigation number 3, January 6th. Ultimately, it will be up to the Department of Justice to decide if the former president broke any laws by encouraging his supporters to march to the Capitol, where violence eventually broke out. And finally, investigations number 4 and 5, New York civil and criminal inquiries into business practices. For instance, the investigation is looking at whether false financial information was submitted to obtain more favorable loans. A big question for the country is when will all these investigations conclude, especially with another run for the White House by Mr. Trump looking more likely.
It would not surprise me if there start to be some decisions made next year.
In Washington, I'm Joe St. George.
The Broncos are back at practice this afternoon, trying to fix some problems that showed up during a 42-15 loss Saturday against the Bills. Now, the preseason doesn't matter in the win or loss column, and mostly backups played for the Broncos, but many of those backups didn't look good, getting outplayed by the Bills, who scored 6 touchdowns on 6 drives.
So we have to evaluate the group as a whole, and we got to tackle better, we got to hold the point better, everything. We want to make sure that they know what they're doing, and then now you go to their technique, how they're doing their technique, and then just simply if they're getting physically outmatched. So it's kind of a step-by-step process to see how all those guys are doing, and that's why this is a great time. You know, it doesn't count, but in the end, you get to evaluate all your guys.
Well, the Broncos have one preseason game left now. It's this Saturday at home against the Minnesota Vikings. Kickoff is at 7. Then the Broncos start the regular season 3 weeks from today in Seattle against the Seahawks. Well, coming up, Colorado ski resorts are announcing opening dates for the upcoming season. Get your calendars out. They're telling skiers to get their lift tickets early. Plus, a popular cat in the high country is abducted, and its owners need your help getting him back.